Good morning, party people, and for the first time in a while, I am like evenly lit. I put in a brand new light over there. My home office setup is kind of weird. There's a door over there and a big old closet door over there. I keep meaning to every now and then, I'm like, I should really redo this particular office and make it a little bit better set up for live streaming. Now that I've been in here for, gosh, is it 2 years now? I think 2 years. Um, so I keep meaning to go through and re-update this, but at the same time, I'm kind of halfway interested in moving. We've been thinking about selling this house and getting a different house because, for one thing, I need more garage space. Although I have sold a couple of cars, which is kind of cool. We're getting down to a reasonable car collection. SQL Dev DBA says, have you seen the new Persona update for the Vision Pro? Yes, I'm actually in the Apple Developer Program, so I saw that. I actually had it running on my excuse me, I had it running on the video that you saw me do for office hours. That was actually the new Persona update, so even before it went live to the public. Rest Token just ordered a BMW i4. Congratulations, very nice. So I had a little hole in my calendar this morning after I got done with some client work. I have about a 1 hour break. Actually, it's less than that now. Oh, it's about an hour before I have to go hop back into a call with that client. I usually book whole day increments, but every now and then I get surprised little holes in the calendar. So I thought, oh, I'll go do a quick an office hour stream. I actually have the next office hours planned out. I'll give you a little preview. I am going to be a vampire, of all odd things. But I didn't want to set the vampire costume up for this office hour since I have a little bit of, kind of a limited amount of time. So I'm just like, oh, I'll do the regular office hours first. So the first question that we have is from Ethan, who asks, what % of your constant care shops require encryption to connect with SQL Server? I have no idea because we don't gather that data. I tend to try to gather as little data as possible in order to give them really good advice. And I don't do security advice. It's actually prohibited in my contract. So like if you hire me for consulting, I refuse to take any kind of security type gigs. It's not because I believe security isn't important. It's that I believe it's so important that you should hire someone who focuses just on security. If that's important to you, it's a very different branch of knowledge than like performance tuning is or high availability is. It's a very specialized piece of knowledge there. Ethan says, what are your thoughts on mandatory encryption? I think it's good in theory. I just have never seen a shop that does it well. Now, at the same time, it doesn't mean they're not out there. It's just that I haven't worked with them. So it's something that I think is a nice thing to have in SQL Server. I just don't see people doing it yet. I think that with the SSMS changes, that'll open people's eyes to what's an option out there, and that might encourage them to do it. Next up, Miles asked, I have an app that spawns multiple connections, multiple transactions. When I'm troubleshooting, it turns out that multiple spids are involved. Yes, that's how blocking usually happens, is that people block each other. It's fairly rare that one person blocks themselves. It can happen with parallel transactions, but it's fairly unusual. How do I troubleshoot issues when multiple spids and databases are involved? There are a few ways you can do it. If you can change indexes only in order to fix blocking, go to my mastering index tuning class, and we have a module on blocking. And I demonstrate it, I show you what causes it, and I show you how to fix it with indexes. If you would rather fix it with query tuning, you're going to attend, wait for it, my Mastering Query Tuning class, where we talk about how to reduce blocking via query changes. And if you're not allowed to change either of those, but you can make server level changes, you're going to attend, that's right, you guessed it, my Mastering Server Tuning class, which will explain to you how to change it with server level changes. Dark Dreamer, thanks for the subscription with Prime, appreciate it. Bob the Lobster says double your hardware. The thing is that additional hardware rarely helps with blocking, because with blocking, typically one session's taking out a lock. It doesn't matter how much hardware you throw at everything else. If that session continues to hold out the lock, that the other additional hardware doesn't help you at all. It's an interesting suggestion, and people often try to do that before they hire a trained consultant. But Greg at BMW, good to see you. Next up, let's see, speaking of blocking, Miles asks, do MSDTC, distributed transactions, get translated into serializable isolation level? Well, there's an easy way to check, actually. Sometimes as a trainer, I'd rather teach you how to fish than give you the fish. This is one of those instances. There's an easy way to check. If you're having problems with MSDTC transactions, why not start a transaction, type begin tran, do something, and then go check to see what isolation level that you're getting. You could check with SP who is active. You could check by looking at the locks that are being held with SP who is active too as well. So you can check that out yourself. Go give it a shot. It's not that hard to test. Then you can see it. Next up, Ignacio asks, do you have a recommended formula for the number of database administrators to the number of VMs? Yes. If you Google for Brent Ozar, how many servers can one person manage? I explain what it's like if you're just managing the hardware, if you're just managing the operating system, if you're just managing SQL Server, if you layer on high availability and disaster recovery, and finally if you layer on performance tuning as well. And I show you how those numbers are related and talk through it. That site again is Brent Ozar, how many servers can one person manage? And it comes up all the time with clients. Karthik asked a question that I actually prepared for when I saw it come in. Karthik says, what is your opinion? The Kazakh, thank you. Thank you for the subscription. Karthik says, what's your opinion of ChatGPT's ability to analyze a pasted query execution plan? And when Karthik's question came in, I was like, oh, it can do what? So I immediately raced over to SSMS, generated an execution plan, pasted it into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT said, I'm sorry, Bob, I'm afraid I can't manage an XML file that large. And it was one table, or was a query with one table in it. No joins, no CTEs, nothing like that. I was just doing select stuff from table. And ChatGPT was like, hold up, big fella. That's big data. So I was like, Karthik, it would be really cool if it could do that. But unfortunately, it cannot. Your job is safe. DBA Junior asks, hi Brent, why does SQL Server allocate space in tempdb for running a query? It's a great question. Go check out my How to Think Like the Engine class. How to Think Like the Engine. It's totally free. You can watch it on YouTube. You can read it via blog posts. I make it available a whole bunch of different ways. It's something that I believe that everybody should sit through whenever they're working with a relational database, not just SQL Server. It'll open up your mind as to how this stuff works. The simple example is, say that you want stuff sorted, say that you want a bunch of data to come back alphabetically or sorted by date, and that there's not an index to support that sort. Well, SQL Server has to scribble that data somewhere as it's doing the sorting. That by default, that's memory, but when it runs out of memory, allocated memory for your query, it switches over into tempdb. And I explain how those numbers are way lower than you think for memory limits, and we talk about that in How to Think Like the Engine. Next up, Ben asks, what are your thoughts on making the domain user for the SQL account a local admin on the VM? I don't do any security work at all. It's actually prohibited by my contract, so I have no thoughts on it whatsoever. Pedro asks, hi Brent, I'm one of the junior DBA admins in a mid-sized company, and I want to be like you. Careful what you wish for. Where do I start? I like to read documentation, so they can hire me for that. One of the most important things I tell people is you want to find out what the business people who pay you want. Go sit down with the people who are responsible for your raises, for your promotions. Sit down next to them and be like, What's the biggest problem you're trying to solve right now? Even if it's not data, just tell me what it is that you're trying to solve right now. Things that you would be really excited about if could get solved and you don't know how to solve them or you don't have the time to solve them. I'll give you an example. When I was doing pretty well as a database administrator, my boss came to me and said, "Hey, man, we cannot figure out how to get our VMware farm working for the love of God. We've tried all kinds of stuff. Do you want to take a crack at it?" And it had nothing to do with database administration, but I was like, "Well, sure, why not?" Because if it's valuable and nobody else in the company can figure out how to do it, it might be valuable to other companies as well. It might be a good specialization for me to go down that rat hole. I talk more about that in my totally free webcast. Brent, and SQL Dev DBA says it in chat too. That's exactly where I was going to go. So I talk about it a lot in my free webcasts, my 300 level guide to career internals and my 500 level guide to career internals. So if you search YouTube for those, they're totally free. And they explain how to plan your career and what's valuable, what companies pay you for. MyTeaGotCold says, I find temp tables so valuable to performance tuning. Hola, pop donk something. I find temp tables so valuable to performance tuning that my go-to solution for tuning functions is to convert them into stored procedures. Is that a common problem? The things that you're talking about there aren't even related. It's kind of like you're saying, I find apples so valuable that I have changed my desserts from cakes to pies. I don't really know where you're going with that. Now, let me rephrase your question one way. I like using temp tables, so should I change my functions to stored procedures just so I can use temp tables? Probably not. Functions are just often bad for all kinds of reasons, but it doesn't really have anything to do with temp tables. Adam says apples do go better in pies, though. I actually disagree. I think apples are way better in cakes, like spice cakes, because I think apples in pie are kind of gross. They're kind of like slimy, so I'm not really a big fan. That's why I use that exact example, which is kind of funny. Next up, let's see. Steve says, hi, Brent. You often say 5 non-clustered indexes per table is a good rule of thumb. It's guide. I try really hard to emphasize this. It's a guide. It's a starting point. It's not the end of the world. It's just a guideline starting point. He says, does this advice change when I'm working with very wide tables that have more than 5 columns that users often search on? Yes. And that's why I have my fundamentals of index tuning classes and my mastering index tuning classes, where I teach you where it makes sense to go higher or lower. I teach you how to measure your tables to know when you need to go higher or lower. And I give you real examples inside those classes where you have to solve problems with different numbers of indexes. Next up, Ignacio says, does SP Blitz check for instant file initialization? Yes, absolutely. That's the whole answer. Yeah, you could have got that from reading the code. It's a T-SQL script. You could have simply opened it and done a Control F for instant or for file initialization or for IFI. But instead, you waited for me to answer that on a webcast. Okay, cool. Oh, Pop Donk is Eugene. Oh, Eugene, welcome. There we go. Who's streaming video games during the pandemic. I streamed Dead by Daylight a couple of times on, I think I did it on this channel, and I know I also had another separate side one that I never told anybody about. Just did it as kind of an anonymous streamer, which was fun. And I need to go back and do that too at some point. I play a lot of Dead by Daylight, usually every day. Sean says, hi, Brent, do you have any experience and or resources you could point my friend to for unit testing SQL Server stored procedure? Yes. I'm going to give you an answer, but hold on. I'm not being a smart aleck when I say this one. Seriously Google for how to unit test SQL Server stored procedures, and you're going to see a link to Microsoft. You're going to see a link to learn.microsoft.com. I know you have a rabid reaction and you think that the documentation sucks, but I tell you what, documentation on relatively new topics, stuff that has come out in the last 3, 4, 5 years, that documentation is actually surprisingly good. Well, I mean, it was surprising to me, but now that I've seen it for a while, I'm pretty confident in the documentation teams at Microsoft. They're doing really good work these days. There actually is a really good landing page on how to unit test T-SQL, believe it or not, so check that out. Atherall asks, why does the 4-day work week work well for the United Kingdom but not the USA? Okay, so if you go back in your history books, you'll find that the United Kingdom, Britain, used to have this big, phenomenal empire. They used to practically rule the world. There was this saying that the sun never sets on the British Empire because at any given time, the sun was bright over some part of the world that Britain managed. Today, not quite as much. I'm not saying that those two things are related, but you know what? The less that you work, the less you get done. Next question. Ethan asks, will strict TLS 1.3 encryption in SSMS 20 cause users to think twice about upgrading from Management Studio 19? Here's the thing, Ethan, if you're assuming that people think about something before they do it, I would disagree. People don't read the release notes. People just think new means updated and shiny. It must be better. So they will update without thinking. So that's the story of life. Karthik asks, how do you keep your mind from racing at bedtime? This is a really good question. One of the things that I like using my Apple Vision Pro for, it's over here somewhere. Got to pick it up and demonstrate it. Demonstrate is the wrong word. I am not going to be using it live on the webcast. One of the things that I like this for a lot is the mindfulness application. The mindfulness application is actually really good. It's like guided meditation. It's phenomenal. So that's one way that I do it. The other way that I like to do it, SQL Pilot High. Other way that I like to do it is I've been a fan of lucid dreaming since like high school. If you search for lucid dreaming, there's a subreddit on it, and that subreddit has a really good pinned message that talks about how to get started with lucid dreaming. The idea is that as you're going to bed, you think about the thing that you want to dream about. You start coming up with that scenario. You're putting yourself in the frame of mind where you're going to have that dream. You go to sleep, you have the dream, and you can guide the dream while it's happening. You can wake up on command. You can change the course of the dream. It's wonderful. It's a technique that I've used for decades, and I completely love it. So it's kind of fun. And then we'll do one more question. Oh, Ignacio asks, I shouldn't have picked this one, but here we go. Aurora says, Ignacio says, how does Aurora Postgres failover speed compare with Azure SQL DB or managed instance or VM failover speeds? I've never done a compare and contrast. I've never timed them back and forth because, frankly, it isn't the way that I would choose a platform. I wouldn't choose a platform based on failover speeds. It's one of those where you choose the platform for other reasons, things like cost, compatibility, ease of management. I can tell you that I have never once noticed an Aurora Postgres failover. I'm sure that they have it. I've just never seen it in my own life. Mercy from row 2. I'm not quite sure how you say that name. Thank you for the subscription, especially for Tier 1, 6 months in advance. Very cool. It's also the name of one of my favorite Better Than Ezra songs is Mercy. I love Better Than Ezra. I've loved him for a long time. Mercy. That's about how, when you were wrestling as a kid, mercy was like the give up word. Well, he's Better Than Ezra, the lead singer, is in a relationship he's singing about, and he's giving up. He's done, and so he's crying mercy. It's a really good song. But so, like, I'm sure that failovers happen. I've just never clock timed them. I feel the same way about Azure SQL DB failovers. Microsoft is really good about looking to see when low activity is happening and then doing preventative failovers at that time, which is really cool. All right, well, we will stop there. I would say that the next time you see the live stream, I'm going to be in a vampire costume, but I won't guarantee that because today is, as I record this, today is Friday, March 8th. Within less than a week, Eve and I fly to Hong Kong and Shanghai. I'm going to a local big data event in Hong Kong, and then also going to both Hong Kong and Shanghai for the just sightseeing and whatnot. Um, so I will do not live streams from down there, but I'll record office hours using my fancy dancy portable electronic recording gear, and then upload those to YouTube. But I just wanted to get this video in since I had the time, and now I'll go hop off and prepare for my next client call. So SQL Dev DBA says office hours from the harbor. Yes, we're actually staying on the harbor in Hong Kong, which will be kind of fun. So I will see y'all at the next office hours. Adios.